A few years ago, researchers ran a simple workplace study. They tracked who got asked for favors the most, who took on extra work, and who felt the most drained by the end of the week. It wasn't the least productive person. It was the nicest one. The person who said yes the fastest, who never pushed back. And here's the strange part. That same person reported the lowest satisfaction, the highest resentment, and the strongest urge to leave, despite never complaining. So if being nice is supposed to make things easier, why does it make things heavier? The answer becomes clearer when you separate two things that look the same on the surface, but feel completely different underneath. Real kindness is a choice. You help because you want to. But being too nice works differently. It shows up when you agree even though you don't, when you stay quiet to avoid tension, when you say yes before you've even checked what you actually feel. And if you notice closely, there's usually a brief moment before you respond. A small pause where something feels off. Most people ignore it. But that moment matters more than it seems. Most people ignore it. And that's exactly where the pattern starts. It isn't just hesitation. It's a signal. In psychology, there's a lesser-known stress response called fawning. Most people are familiar with fight, flight, and freeze. But fawn works differently. Instead of resisting or escaping, you smooth things over. You adapt. You become agreeable in real time. The term was described by therapist Pete Walker, who observed that, under chronic stress, some people don't push back at all. They adjust themselves to whatever the situation seems to demand, not because they want to, because their nervous system learned it was safer. So in that brief pause before you say yes, you're not really deciding. Patterns like this don't appear randomly. They get built early. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and later studied by Mary Ainsworth, shows that children depend on caregivers for survival. And when that connection feels unstable or conditional, they adapt. They become easy to be around, less demanding, less likely to create tension. If that works, it gets repeated. Over time, it stops feeling like a strategy. It starts to feel like who you are. But what looks like personality is often just something that once kept you safe. And it doesn't stop at childhood. There's a deeper layer underneath this. For most of human history, being pushed out of your group wasn't just uncomfortable. It was fatal. Survival depended on staying included. Your brain still carries that logic. Research by Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA showed that social rejection activates many of the same neural pathways as physical pain. In other words, your brain doesn't treat being excluded as a small emotional event. It treats it as a threat. So when you feel that subtle pressure to agree, to avoid tension, to keep things smooth, it isn't just social awareness. It's an alarm, one that has been wired into the human nervous system for thousands of years. The problem is that alarm hasn't updated. It can't tell the difference between real danger and mild discomfort, so it fires anyway, and you respond anyway. This is where things start to feel a little more uncomfortable. Because being agreeable doesn't just affect how you feel, it also changes how other people respond to you. In personality psychology, agreeableness is one of the big 5 traits. People who score high in it tend to be cooperative, generous, and less likely to push back. That sounds positive. And it is. But in group settings, something consistent shows up. Those same people end up taking on more requests, more unassigned work, and more emotional responsibility than others around them. Not necessarily because anyone intends to take advantage of them, but because human behavior doesn't need intention, it just follows what's easiest. If someone never says no, there's nothing to push against. So things keep getting added. Quietly. Gradually. Until it becomes normal. Like water moving through soft ground. It doesn't choose it, it just flows there. For most people, things just drift in that direction. No one is trying to exploit you. It simply happens. But not always. Research by Robert Hare shows that some people are very good at identifying who they can push, and they look for specific signals. People who smile too quickly, who apologize too easily, who rarely push back. Those behaviors send a clear message. This person won't resist. And once that signal is picked up, the dynamic begins to shift. Slowly, subtly, until the relationship starts to feel one-sided. And if you've seen this before, you already know it rarely happens just once. After a while, a pattern starts to form. The relationship changes. You eventually step away. Things feel normal again. And then, months or years later, it happens again. different person, same dynamic. At first, it doesn't seem connected. The details are different. The context changes. But the structure stays the same. And that's the part most people miss. It's not about who you meet. It's about what repeats. Because when nothing in the pattern is interrupted, the outcome rarely changes. Over time, something subtle starts to happen. People who naturally respect boundaries stop checking in. They assume everything is fine because nothing has ever suggested otherwise. So they give you space. And quietly, they drift away. The ones who stay are different. They're the ones who benefit from things staying exactly as they are. Which means, without any single dramatic moment, your environment begins to shift. And slowly, you end up surrounded by relationships that only work because you don't have needs. And after a while, that doesn't feel strange anymore. It just feels normal. There's a specific moment that reveals how deep this pattern runs. Someone asks you a simple question, "What do you want?" And for a second, you don't have an answer. Not because you're being polite, not because you're unsure how it sounds, but because nothing comes up. Research by Harriet Breaker found that when people suppress their own preferences for long enough, the ability to access them starts to fade. Your internal compass doesn't break all at once. It slowly recalibrates to other people, until one day, it stops pointing anywhere at all. The consequences don't show up all at once. They build quietly. In small moments, you barely notice. Laughing when something isn't funny. Agreeing when you don't agree. Staying silent when you have something to say. Each one feels insignificant, but they accumulate, and eventually, that pressure has to go somewhere. So it shows up in unexpected ways. Irritation at small things. Reactions that feel bigger than they should. And then, almost immediately, guilt, which leads to the same conclusion. You need to be better, more patient, more understanding. And the pattern tightens again. Here's the part that complicates everything. Kindness itself isn't the problem. In fact, research in positive psychology, especially by Martin Seligman, shows that kindness is one of the most reliable sources of well-being. But only under one condition. It has to be chosen. Studies by Netta Weinstein and Richard Ryan found that helping others improves well-being when it feels voluntary. When it comes from pressure, the effect reverses. The behavior looks the same from the outside, but internally, it's completely different. One builds you, the other slowly drains you. So how does this actually change? Just set boundaries sounds simple, but for someone stuck in this pattern, it rarely works. Because the issue isn't just behavior, it's what happens internally before the behavior. So the first step is smaller. Notice the moment before you say yes. Don't change it yet, just see it. Then try something even smaller. A low-stakes no. No explanation, no apology. And watch what happens. In most cases, nothing breaks. And that's important, because your nervous system doesn't update from logic. It updates from experience. By now, you can probably see the pattern more clearly. Where it started, how it works, why it repeats. And that alone already changes something. Because once you can see it, you're no longer fully inside it. And here's the part most people don't expect. You don't become less kind when you change this. You become more real, more consistent, because you're no longer giving from pressure. You're giving from something that actually belongs to you. And that kind of kindness doesn't drain you. It sustains you.